Welcome to This Explainer. Today we are doing something absolutely wild. We're going to compress over 500 years of exploration, revolution, struggle, and literal world-changing innovation into one massive, fast-paced journey. And we're doing it all against this epic, cinematic 3D backdrop. So strap in because we are covering the complete history of the United States from 1492 all the way to today.
Let's kick things off with a really massive question that's going to frame our entire explainer. How exactly did 13 tiny, completely isolated British colonies somehow transform into the world's most powerful nation? Well, it's an incredible story of dramatic turning points that quite literally built the modern world you and I live in right now. You know, the whole shebang stems from this incredibly fragile starting point. 13. Just 13 colonies. But to really grasp how the U.S. was built, we can't just start the clock there. Actually, we need to rewind way back, long before those colonies were even a blip on a map. Which brings us to part 1, the origins and early explorers.
Now, a lot of people forget this, but long before European ships ever crossed the Atlantic, North America was absolutely thriving. We're talking about advanced Native American civilizations that had been here for thousands of years. They built sophisticated farming communities and these massive, sprawling trade networks that stretched across the entire continent. Their legacy is the true original foundation of this land.
Then, of course, the timeline totally shifts with European exploration. In 1492, Columbus hits the Americas, and boom, it's a frantic race for territory by Spain, France, England, and the Netherlands. This exploration rapidly turned into permanent and, honestly, pretty perilous settlements. Think Jamestown in 1607 and the Pilgrims landing on the Mayflower in 1620. This massive collision of two very different worlds really set the stage for everything that was about to follow.
All right, moving on to part 2, the Crucible, the birth of a new nation.
Okay, picture this. Decades roll by, the colonies are growing rapidly, and this massive power struggle starts brewing. On one side, you've got the British imposing these heavy, totally unyielding taxes. On the other side, boiling colonial anger. And the breaking point was the Boston Tea Party in 1773. It was this crazy, audacious act of economic rebellion. It basically proved once and for all that the colonists were totally done taking orders from a king sitting an ocean away.
And that anger? It ignited like a powder keg into a full-blown revolution in 1775. By July 4th, 1776, they made it official with the Declaration of Independence. Led by George Washington's brilliant strategy, the Continental Army fought through these brutal, freezing winters and basically impossible odds until 1783, when America officially won its independence.
But here's the thing. Winning independence was really only half the battle. Surviving as a brand new country required a totally new operating system. Enter the U.S. Constitution in 1787. This was the ultimate foundational framework for the government. Honestly, it was a blueprint for a daring democratic experiment that the world had literally never seen before.
With that framework locked in, the nation absolutely hit the gas pedal. In 1789, George Washington becomes the first president, which kicks off this aggressive era of westward expansion. The absolute craziest part of this era, the Louisiana Purchase. For just pennies an acre, the U.S. literally doubled its physical size overnight. Talk about the ultimate real estate deal.
Which leads us directly into part 3, the fracture. A nation divided and reunited.
So as the nation is expanding geographically, its internal cracks are getting way deeper. You essentially had two completely different economies emerging, a heavily industrial north and a highly agricultural south. But right at the very core of this growing divide was the deeply entrenched institution of slavery. It created this massive moral and economic chasm that no amount of political compromise could bridge anymore.
The tension finally just snapped. The election of Abraham Lincoln was the catalyst that plunged the country into the deadliest conflict ever fought on American soil. The Civil War violently tore the nation in two, and it raged relentlessly from 1861 all the way to 1865.
Right in the thick of all that devastation came a massive strategic and moral turning point, the Emancipation Proclamation. This historic decree by President Lincoln fundamentally changed what the war was even about. It paved the way to ensure that, once reunited, America would finally and fully abolish the institution of slavery.
Now we hit part 4, the ascent, the rise of a global power.
Coming out of the ashes of the Civil War, America entered a century of just extreme highs and crushing lows. The country rode this immense wave of wealth during the Industrial Revolution, only to get pulled into the absolute horrors of World War I. Then right after that came the crushing economic despair of the Great Depression, which was followed almost immediately by the shocking attack on Pearl Harbor, thrusting the country right into a second global conflict.
And that conflict, of course, was World War II. By emerging victorious, the United States completely changed its standing on the world stage. Coming out of the 1940s, it was no longer just a participant in global affairs. It was cemented, without a doubt, as an unmatched global superpower.
Let's jump into part 5, the modern era.
The second half of the 20th century was just a rapid-fire explosion of change. American society evolved radically thanks to the incredible courage of the civil rights movement, led by icons like Martin Luther King Jr. On the international stage, you had the tense, high-stakes dynamics of the Cold War. Later on, the tragic 9/11 attacks would completely reshape modern security. And happening right alongside all of this was an absolute technological miracle, the internet boom, which fundamentally rewired how you and I live and communicate right now.
But right in the middle of all that massive change came what has to be a peak of human innovation. 1969, the Apollo 11 moon landing. Pushing the very limits of human potential, America put actual human beings on another celestial body. And the craziest part? They did it using less computing power than the smartphone sitting in your pocket right now. No way, right?
The modern political landscape kept breaking historical barriers, too. Decades after the Civil War and the Civil Rights Movement, the election of Barack Obama as the first African-American president stood as a really powerful reflection of the country's ongoing story. It's a story of constant struggle, steady progress, and the enduring promise of opportunity.
And that brings us to today. That original 1492 colonial spirit, that intense drive to explore the unknown, it is absolutely still alive. But instead of sailing wooden ships across the ocean, today America is pioneering artificial intelligence, driving endless technological innovation and making a massive push deep back into space.
So, from a fragile little group of 13 colonies to one of the world's most influential nations, America's journey is still actively shaping global history. As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with one thrilling question to think about. From 1492 to the dawn of AI, what exactly will America's next chapter look like? Keep learning, keep questioning, and I'll catch you in the next explainer.